Now, what boy growing up doesn't love a dinosaur? What boy growing up doesn't love a big hulking robot? When you've got one wrestling the other, grabbed me. Just dragged me in. Afternoon, YouTube. Al here from One Man Many Plans, and of course the blog of the same name over at onemanmanyplans.com.au. And here's hoping today's video finds you nice and safe and warm. Warmer than I am because it's an Australian winter at the moment. It is freezing outside. We've had fog, we've had rain, we've had plenty of miserable conditions. And as a consequence, the workshop downstairs in my house, that's even colder. But hey, cold weather aside, today we are talking about the amazing covers on game books. And today's topic actually came about because I was reminiscing the other day, just surfing YouTube here as you do, and I was reminiscing about how good the Fighting Fantasy game book series were with a few videos. And I saw that a few creators had actually popped up their favorite covers and talked about their favorite covers and why they were their favorite. I thought, that's great. But I'm going to extend it out a little bit because the Fighting Fantasy series is awesome and they have some sensational covers. But in my time growing up with all of the game books, it wasn't just FF that I was playing. I was trying a few different things. And so what I've done is I've created a list. It was to be top 5, but then I realized I left one out, a glaring omission. So I've made it a top 6, which includes Fighting Fantasy books, but also a solo game book, completely different system that I love the artwork for, that really hooked me in, and a couple of rule books for role-playing games, really, really popular role-playing games too, because they just had an art style to it at the time that just either took my breath away or just grabbed my attention, grabbed hold of me and never let me go. And in one particular case, I ended up buying so many source books and playing with mates and all that kind of stuff, but we'll get to that in just a sec. I will mention that one of them does have cyberpunk-style themes to it. Maybe that's a hint. Just quickly, if you love your cyberpunk stuff, well, make sure you check out some of my books up on Amazon at the moment. The Hackfrost series, it's got plenty of cyberpunk themes in there. Action, adventure, guns, cyberware, you name it, it's there. It's available now on Amazon. Whether you want to read them solo or there's actually all the books in one ready to go. That's on Amazon. Link down below. You can check that out. The other thing I'd love you to do before we get into the top 6, 6 not 5, is that if you love chat like this, there's plenty of this in the future. So I'd love you to like and subscribe. I want to build this channel up as big as possible. At my time of uploading, I'm almost at 100 subscribers, and I can't wait to get to 100, let alone 1,000, let alone 10,000. So if you're really enjoying this kind of stuff, you love being part of this chat and not just commenting, please subscribe, follow, love to have you on board. And let's do it. Let's check out my top 6 game book art covers of all time. Okay, so I mentioned Fighting Fantasy. Well, there's no surprise that there's a lot of Fighting Fantasy in my top 6. Starting at number 6 with Freeway Fighter. This was game book number 13 in the Fighting Fantasy series, and it came out in 1985 when I was all of 5. Now, I don't think I read it when I was 5. I reckon I would have been 8 or 9, just at my local library. Would have been in Richmond, Australia at the time. And that would have been Carringbush Library, I reckon. And just seeing that long line of green spines, going through them and looking at it, they had some amazing fantasy art pieces, and there's a couple of that made the list further on. But just coming across this one, number 13, and looking at the car with spikes and just going, wow, how good does that look? And there's a guy on top of the car with spikes holding a gun. What could possibly go wrong with that? Now, as art goes, it's very 80s. It's very sort of post-apocalyptic, future style. It was a book heavily influenced by Mad Max. I didn't really know much of the Mad Max universe at that time, have since caught up and absolutely love it, especially some of the newer stuff. But at the time, when you're an 8 or 9-year-old and you're obsessed with guns and explosions and all those kinds of things, this cover was enough for me to go, oh, that's so different to everything else on this shelf. Let's give this a go. And I actually enjoyed the game book too, cruising around in the Dodge Interceptor, which I thought was really, really cool. At one stage, you were trying to avoid getting bitten by rats. You could get a supercharger for your Dodge. You were having battles on the freeway, and there were med kits, and then there was, getting fuel for your town. Very Mad Max-esque like. But the cover was just something that I just went, yeah, that is so cool. I'm really, really enjoying that. Dated nowadays, But we're talking in the mid-80s. And in the mid-80s, and when I was a little kid, this cover was awesome. So that is definitely one on my list. Now, if you weren't aware of the Tunnels and Trolls gaming system, it was a lot more complicated than Fighting Fantasy, because instead of just skill, stamina, and luck, usually you had strength, and you had constitution, and you had speed, and you had a whole heap of different stats, and you could level up. It was one of those game books that really just took playing solo to the next level and the next level upon that, and you could carry your character from one book to the other, which Lone Wolf of the Kai did, but it wasn't as complex as Tunnels and Trolls. And the beautiful thing about this in the early 80s, late 70s, I believe, as well, was when it was originally coming out. These solo game books, the front covers always followed the same theme. It was a really, really buff warrior, either looking at something epic or about to fight something epic, usually with very, very little armor. I mean, we're talking the era where, you know, heroes like Conan the Barbarian, they didn't need armor. They were just jacked and ready to go. Maybe they had a helmet. Definitely they had a loincloth, but that was it. And a big double-sided battle axe or a huge longsword or, you know, just in this case, a pole weapon. And out of all of the books that I was reading at the time, same library, same experiences with Fighting Fantasy, this cover of Naked Doom and Death Trap Equalizer was just glorious to little kid version of Al, because hey, there is a multi-armed demon on the front cover and he's holding weapons, and our hero, which would be me when I pick up this book and I roll my stats and I play the game, I'm charging at him with just a spear in my hand. I mean, how could that possibly go wrong? How awesome is that? And I'm guessing the idea for this possibly came from a lot of artwork, fantasy artwork at the time, where it usually was a big monster and someone charging at it with a little weapon. And you're just thinking, the chances of you making this through this are really, really slim, but I wish you the best of luck, and it's making an awesome picture. So, yeah, I can't remember every game book I've ever played of Tunnels and Trolls, but they were just so different to Fighting Fantasy. I have one in my entire collection. I haven't seen them in the wild since. They seem to be even rarer than FF series, but definitely Naked Doom and Death Trap Equalizer was the book cover that just took me back. And every time I see it, I just go, you know what? It's still awesome. I still love the cover to this day. Now, what boy growing up doesn't love a dinosaur? My nephews absolutely adore them. What boy growing up doesn't love a big hulking robot of some description? My nephews love them. I certainly did when I was a kid. When you've got one wrestling the other on a fantasy book cover or a game book cover, how awesome. Two worlds colliding, absolutely incredible. And again, one of those books that just made me want to go, I need to find out more. I want to read this book purely by the power of the illustration alone. Grab it. And it turned out to be a great book. I really enjoyed Robot Commando. It was kind of cool because you could get into different robots and you were hoping to have the best fighting robot by the time you got to the very end and battled the big boss robot, I think, of the evil forces. It's been a while since I played it. But I just remember the cover was enough to grab little me, and I've loved it and enjoyed it ever since. And yeah, very 80s style. I would have loved to be there when they handed the illustrator the missive and said, hey, we need a dinosaur and a robot in a wrestling match, and they both need to be suffering war wounds. So scratches on the dinosaur and possibly some dino blood, and definitely some rents in the metal of the robot. What can you come up with? And this is what they came up with. And honestly, it's pretty awesome. All right, 3 more to go, and this is the first of 2 game rule books that I'm including in my top 6 list. And the story of this one is actually in the early 90s. Now, I've mentioned Mind Games in Melbourne CBD. Here in Australia, a couple of times in previous videos, most famously in the Inquisition miniatures video, because I spent a lot of time and a lot of my pocket money at mind games, usually buying minis, but on the odd occasion, I'd actually flick through all of the role-playing games and all of the books on the shelves. At the time, they had a ton of rule books and source books and everything you needed to know about Dungeons and Dragons, but it wasn't something that particularly grabbed me. What did grab me one day when I was flicking through the shelf was this cover that just took me to a completely different world entirely, and that was Cyberpunk 2020, the second edition cover. Like Freeway Fighter, earlier on in this list, there's not much going on. There's a car, there's a nice-looking girl, there's a serious-looking guy, he's got a gun, but just that combination, the light-up eyes, the neon colours, the cityscape, everything else was enough for me to just go, oh, this is pretty cool. Took the book off the shelf, I read the back, and I went, right, I want to buy this. It was $40. I think I had $20 in my wallet at the time, Velcro wallet. So I saved up for a couple of weeks, got $10 a week on pocket money, and then I couldn't wait to get in there and buy the book. And then I got to appreciate all of the amazing artwork inside the book, but it was the cover at the start that was just a little bit different from everything else on offer, and enough for me to just go, I wonder how this system is going to go. I fell in love with that cyberpunk ethos and everything, to the point where I started buying as many of the source books as possible. So I had the Chrome books, and I had Rocker Boy, the very first version of it. I had Solo of Fortune, and we're talking those really early covers, which were, made on the cheap and some grainy photos and bits and pieces. And I thought that was pretty cool. Forlorn Hope, books like that, and just fell in love with the universe. Didn't get to play much with my mates. We had a couple of sessions, but I wasn't the greatest DM. But for me, it was just the lore of Cyberpunk and that particular universe that just attracted me. And it was this cover that got me started. Telsurian, or however you pronounce it, thank you so much for making me spend so much money on your product back in the day, but just introducing me to that different world, kind of inspired by Robot Commando, kind of inspired by Freeway Fighter, but just opened up a whole different universe for me, and it was all because of that random occurrence in Mind Games. So Mind Game staff, thank you too for sticking Cyberpunk up on your shelves. Now, number 2 is actually a draw. And what I could have done was I could have had a top 7 and put one and then the other. But the problem I'm having here is with the 2 entries in number 2, I can't decide which one I like more. Both are fighting fantasy books. Both are in the 30s series. So, 30 to 39. I am talking the amazing covers of both fighting fantasy, number 35, Daggers of Darkness, and number 39, Fangs of Fury. Now, the reason I love these covers, how could you not? Just look at what's going on. You've got someone evil riding a couple of really out-of-the-ordinary mounts. One's wielding a sword, one's wielding a flail, one's got a bird, one's got an eye patch. They're 2 different areas, and it's just one of those things where you just go, what is going on with this completely over-the-top, almost absurd level cover, but how awesome do they look? Now, I have done a little bit of homework, a little bit of backstory on this, because I sort of thought, I'm just wondering, is it the same artist for both covers? Did he look at his original work and go, I'm going to go down that line? And it turns out it's not. Daggers of Darkness was done by a guy called Les Edwards. So that was number 35. And then 4 onwards came Fangs of Fury, and the cover art was by a guy named David Gallagher. I'm wondering, when they came to the second book, did they just give the copy of Les Edwards' book to David and say, could you do something along this style? Or maybe he just had the same brilliant idea. Now, the reason that I'm putting them both in this category is that technically I like the art style of Daggers of Darkness just a little bit better than Fangs of Fury. And Fangs of Fury was a book that I owned and read and loved. And there's a particular moment, depending on where you go in the adventure, where you do fight that guy on the snakes. And you read about the snakes coming down and then the guy appears. And so for me, I can't forget that moment. So rather than try and work out which one's better art-wise, I love the scene, I love the action, I love the pose, I love the idea. I don't know if one came after the other or they're just completely incidental, but either way, look at that fantasy art. There's a lot to love here. I'm going to call it a draw and leave it at that, which leads me to my ultimate favorite game book cover of all time, which is It is Shadowrun First Edition because there is so much going on, but also so many strong memories of the lead up to this particular book. Now, interesting story about this one. I bought the Shadowrun First Edition rulebook a long, long time after Cyberpunk. It just happened to be on sale somewhere, and I just went, great. I've heard about this for so long that I need to grab it. Before I got into Cyberpunk, though, when I was in Mind Games, same place that I've picked up both, this game and Cyberpunk's original rulebook, I actually came across this pamphlet on the desk, and it was like A4 size. It was a little booklet they were giving away for free, and it was promoting Shadowrun. And it had, from memory, the amazing Shadowrun cover, and then it had this incredible story about a guy in a sprawl trying to work with an elven bikie gang and shooting snipers and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought that was amazing. Plus, it had all this high-quality artwork in it as well, on just about every page. Foolishly, I cut that up. And I had that posted up on my wall. Like, I kept the story for a little bit, but just to me, the artwork and some of the great detail was more than enough for me to just proudly display it on my wall. So I cut it up, including the Shadowrun cover, and had it on my wall as an unofficial poster, if you will. It was my first taste of that particular universe. I didn't get to play it and appreciate it till much further on in the piece, but I would wake up to that just about every single day. And there was a lot of other stuff, like later on there was some 40k orcs and my hand-drawn space marines and various bits and pieces that just didn't look that great. My artistic tendencies, or my artistic talents at the time, were pretty rough, but that was just such an inspiring piece to me, the front cover, with everything going on, because you had cyberware, you had magic, you had elves, you had a gun battle, you had a sprawl, you had just about every box ticked. It was an action cover, unlike Cyberpunk, which was a cool cover. And to me, it just said, this is awesome. This is something that I want to get into. And I did get into it eventually. I have to admit, I never bought any source books for the rulebook. It was just not a game that I played with any friends, but I still loved the lore. I still loved the novels that came out. Some of my favorite ones, like Never Trust an Elf, A Tiger Assassin. Great books, great universe, front cover artwork, had me absolutely hooked. And God, do I wish I still had that introductory pamphlet to the world of Shadowrun somewhere to just do a video about, because it just, I don't know. I don't remember too much demo material coming out for a source book or a role-playing system or anything. And you certainly don't see that much anymore. But it was just, hey, do you want one of these? Here, have a pamphlet, have a read, see what you think. And yeah, grabbed me. And again, just dragged me in. So there you go. There's my top 6. I'd love to know your top 6. It doesn't have to be top 6 if you don't have 6. Maybe you've got 10. Maybe you've got 20. Feel free to just bombard the comments, please. I'd love to know. Maybe there's just one particular cover that grabbed your attention and didn't let go, and you just went, yep, cool. It's beautiful. It's got me hooked. I've since gone out and bought the poster. I've printed it. I've done all of these kinds of things. You may even have a tattoo of a front cover. If you do, please let me know. That would just make a great story. But appreciate your comments below. If you've come across a bit of fantasy game book artwork, fantasy or sci-fi, obviously it's a big universe of all of those, please let me know in a comment below. And like I said earlier, love you to like and subscribe. Plenty more of this kind of chat coming up for you soon. In the meantime, stay warm, and thanks for checking out my latest video.